Hey everyone, welcome to the Trailblaze Your Path podcast, previously known as the Parts Girl podcast. I'm very excited to be interviewing Jeannie Reitelbach, and thank you
You
so
got
much.
it.
Yes, I did it right. She is the brand director for Scott Auto Group. She's an amazing human being. I've been following her, stalking her on LinkedIn, and we finally have the chance to do an interview. And I think everyone's going to learn so much from her because your journey and your career and just women in automotive is so inspiring. So we're just going to have a conversation about all of that.
I love it. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and I really enjoy speaking with you. So this is fun.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. We pretty much chatted for half an hour before this conversation. So
Yes. I feel like we did this and we'll do it again.
yeah. So first, describe brand director because I feel like that's not a common title that dealerships have, and it was one that just kind of came out of your dealer's mouth, and that's your title. So
Yes.
describe that.
So I would say that a brand director role would activate a brand promise. And so they'd activate a brand promise in all areas of the dealership so that the customer experience and the employee experience matches what are those values and expectations. And so in doing that, there's consistency. The brand does work that then marketing and advertising doesn't have to do. So our brand promise is thoughtful and professional. That's our promise.
I love that. And I think that's so important for businesses to have because I really think that helps marketing to just connect because marketing works so hard. And then, I think there could be some frustration when there's not that connection with the brand.
Yes. And it's interesting you bring up marketing. So the way that I think of it is this. I think we have brand. I think we have then brand that helps us to do marketing activities. And then those marketing activities, which are really important, help us to develop strategies. And that strategy then becomes advertising campaigns. So, joining our industry in this space, I think there's a lot of confusion between brand versus marketing versus advertising campaigns. And it's not that they're separate of each other, but I think there's distinctions to the steps of that. I think brand is foundational.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think marketing is the activities we do. There's, oh my gosh, in marketing, there's so many ways to approach that field. You've got product marketing, you've got nurture marketing, you've got digital, you've got all of it, right?
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm in it.
Right, right. So marketing within an auto group is really to understand the strategy, right? And to make sure that that strategy can pivot and change with the market's expectations. And then making sure that we then use our advertising campaigns and the different avenues that are available, really fantastic digital opportunities these days, then to say, hey, we know your expectations and we're raising our hand to meet them. And that's why you should choose us.
I feel like that's like the perfect way to describe it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've been doing this role for 12 years or you've been with the group for 12?
So I have been with the group for 12 years. I didn't start in the brand director role. So that's a more recent role as part of their executive team. I'd say recent in the last like maybe 4 years
Okay.
when our dealer principal started to put a lot of focus on core values, redefining the mission, really digging into what the vision is, and then going into growth mode. So I'd say again, just those foundational things that really define a brand. That's when he kind of, had me pivot a bit. Now I still did marketing and advertising activities, and I still do as part of the brand director role,
Yeah.
but I've kind of added to what my responsibilities for the company are.
Okay, so I want to talk about the brand director because the way you describe that is perfectly. I love it's because in our industry we have to pivot and and we can't stay the same. And I think that's what you guys have realized is, you have to pivot and you have to constantly be changing.
Yes.
And that's what your role is. You're managing all of that and
Yes.
bringing everyone together to see that.
Well, the market has expectations for us.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to know what the market expectations are. That's really the market research. That's really sensitivity to understanding like it's changed. That's the customer experience expectations, right? And
Yes.
then those expectations change, consumers change with each new introduction of technology. With the Amazon, everyone talks about the Amazon effect, right? The Amazon
Mm-hmm.
effect, like that speed with
Yes.
which consumers are able to get what they want and to do it
So
quickly,
fast.
right? And
Can
yet at
you
the same time, in automotive,
just so in automotive, it's incredible. And can you just take a step back and think about the people who
sure,
created Amazon? It wasn't it like in their garage and everyone said they were crazy.
yeah,
Just like the Blockbuster, Netflix or scenario or Redbox or whatever you want to call it. But
those of us who sometimes think different, right? I think that is probably a requisite for a brand director candidate. I think you have to be a little bit nuanced to the way you think
Mhm.
so that you don't get pulled into your environment too much
That makes sense.
and
You're
you can keep an external perspective, right?
and you
And
can
be the
question.
customer's voice.
Yes, you can. And I feel like when I've listened to you speak in clubhouses or just your videos, you're asking questions that make us think about certain situations. It's not just like, this is how I feel about it. This is how I feel, and asking questions so that they can understand what you're talking about, I think, is what I've gathered that you do.
Good. Yes. I don't want to talk.
Mhm.
My biggest fear is to be in this space and to represent women in this space and to be a talking head. Oh, that's my biggest fear.
Mhm.
I don't want to be a talking head.
Yeah.
So, is that even a saying? I feel like that's a
Yeah.
saying.
Talking head. I just know there's a band called Dirty
Yeah,
Heads.
I was just going to say there's a band called Talking Heads.
Oh,
So I
there is
want
a band, Talking Heads, yeah. Or
right?
Talking I
So
don't
it
know.
must mean something. I hope I'm using it the right way. In other words, I don't want to be a theory lady.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be a theory and like this is how it's always been done. You question how it's always been done and not in a way that it's the wrong way. You're just trying to understand why it's always been done and this is the way that you see that it might shift, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
My advantage too is that if, we don't have time for it in this podcast, I have to work on this. But if you learned my life story, it is not typical. So I've had to really shift. I call myself a shifter. I've had to shift so frequently in my life that it has allowed me to kind of define a life that I think is super awesome. Like I live an extraordinary life and not to the standards of other people, but I'm saying extraordinary to the standards of
What you
my
want.
own version of my story and how I take things that didn't go the way it was, these things didn't go the way they were supposed to. And then I just say, okay, now what's my choice? And how can I make this
How do
part
you
of, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go
No, I
finish your
want you to interrupt.
thought.
We're
Okay.
in a
I know
conversation. Let's do
I
it the
need to
way
get better.
we really talk.
I know I
It's
need to
not
get better at
wishy-washy.
interrupting.
Go ahead.
Oh, now I've got to remember my thought. Oh, as you're going through making those choices in life, this could be life, career, whatever. How do you, if you feel like it's a bad choice or a wrong choice that you've made, how do
Mhm.
you move on from that? And I'm kind of reflecting in my own life, like some of the choices I've made. I'm like, man, I shouldn't have done this, but but then I'm like, I'm here and I've got so much great things going on right now, so I can't change all those choices I made because all those choices led to where I am. But you get in this like mind thing of like, well, if I would have done this, then this would happen, and then maybe like, I don't know if I'm
I
making sense.
do know. I do know. I think it's a really important question, and I'm going to give my best answer. I've made so many mistakes that I've had to really become an expert at that. And so I think it's going to start with the ability to really learn how to forgive ourselves. And then how do you do that? Well, between these years are all these stories and all these measurements and all these expectations. And those of us that really enjoy, like we get like a real kick out of performing, we're the worst at telling ourselves what those measurements are and then saying, oh, we flunked the measurement. And so I just think it was the years of experience knowing that that caused so much suffering in my life and that I was not here to suffer. Like, I'm here for abundance. I'm here for joyfulness. I'm here so that my daily, gives me those moments where I grab them and I'm grateful. And so I had to really just grow as a human being and say, I'm not honoring myself when I'm suffering like that. What is making me suffer? Oh my gosh, self-awareness. Here it comes. I'm making me suffer.
Yes.
So I like to say this is what I've done. I've put some activities in my life so that this thing happens and it's not the way it was supposed to go. So here I am and this thing happens. But this is where I want it to be. And then there's this space here where, what do I do with this now? And my initial reaction is emotion because we're human beings. How long I replay that emotion is my fault.
Yes, that
So
makes sense.
feel it, honor it. And then after the emotion is over, start to really write down choices. Right? What do I do now? How do I shift this? How do I pivot?
We're never stuck. We are never stuck.
My worst fear is to be stuck. When my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, I talk about it a lot because there's a whole bunch of facets to me. Sure, I'm auto. Sure, I'm marketing. Sure, I'm brand. But I'm mom, I'm wife, right?
Yes, and I want to talk about all of that.
Yeah, through my experiences, I also want to really advocate for what life with epilepsy is like, whether it's my own or my son's. And one of the things I have to say is you have to shift and pivot a lot. And I beat myself up for things that I couldn't figure out. And why would I figure these out when we got this diagnosis, right? And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And then I realized that he depended on me to move on real quick and get to what needed to happen next for him. And so we've talked about this before. I used running for that. And so it was in my 30s really that I started running. I think I was 37 when I started running for the first time. Running gave me an opportunity to learn emotional control. And so when you're asking that question, how do you do it, right?
Yeah.
You got to find the thing. And it doesn't have to be my thing. It doesn't have to be running. It could be a whole bunch of things, but it has to be something that teaches your mind, feel this thing. And then you've got this place in between that you've got to get through. And then once you get through it to here, then you make action happen. Running allowed me to stop the feeling because, like I said, you can't run up a hill when you're bawling your eyes out, right?
True. Yes.
So that was the thing that helped me to learn the discipline to stop and create emotional control in my life. And then the rhythm and the activity itself gave me the ability to kind of scan my brain, scan my body, scan my reactions, and then really put together a strategy. Okay, you're calm. A calm brain can think better and make choices.
This is true.
Yeah. So, and then I would learn what I could do afterwards. So I don't know if, it's good. That was a long-winded way of saying emotional control and whatever the activity is that trains us to do that so we could feel. I'm not saying deny it, feel it.
Feel it. Yeah.
Get past it. in whatever way works. You got to try a bunch of things. Again, I didn't even really try things until I was in my 30s. So I was probably not very emotionally controlled before then, which is, probably worked to my disadvantage in those younger years. But since then, it's allowed me to go through a lot of different disappointments
Because I think in
and
and
move
then,
on and then
and
turn it into something wonderful,
yes,
crazy.
it's it's incredible. I think that I'm just thinking as a parent, and I'm newer to parenting and learning that we want to fix everything, but we
Right.
have to. I mean, it's harder with like when your child is diagnosed with something, you just want to fix it. But I think it still boils down to like they just need you to be there for them,
That's right.
right?
That's
And
right.
that's what you figured out through running is how to not try to fix it and just be there to
There
figure
was
it out.
no fixing it.
Yeah.
And that sucked. And that's the story I played in my brain. And that's when you talk about the word stuck, I got stuck. And I needed something to get me unstuck. And I noticed that behavior can lead thoughts. I guess there's probably fancy words for a cognitive behavior, right? So it's framing things. And so behavior itself can lead to better framing. And sometimes that behavior has to be real hard, real physical. I like running, for instance, because it's freaking hard.
It's hard.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of, okay, this is hard. So, like, you'll go through things at work, you'll go through things with a spouse, with friendships in the neighborhood, with your kids. You're like, this is so hard. But then when you go and you run a hill, you're like, this is hard,
It's hard.
right?
I have to tell you, there is a hill on. I've been running, but mostly walking. But I've been doing like 4 miles a day, which is really awesome for
Very
me.
well.
It's awesome. And the community I live in, there's a giant hill, and I make sure I go up that hill because I'm like, I want to be out of breath and
Yes.
but I think of you every time I go up the hill because I'm like, this lady, she ran up these hills.
What a
And
compliment.
this hill probably not even.
Oh, that is an extraordinary compliment. You see, those are we just did it. We just had that moment. Like if you say,
Yes.
what am I about? What's Jean Reitelbach about? I'm about that. What just happened this moment? Like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's so wonderful. That's what I hope. I hope to be honest, authentic in my life, in my work, so that we just had that just really good, genuine moment.
Yeah,
That's great because it is important that you do those hills
it is.
and that you're breathless and at the top that you congratulate yourself.
I love them. And I even talk to people sometimes because I try to work on my walks if I have to. And I'll
Yes.
be talking. I'm like, I'm out of breath because I'm walking up a hill, but I
Good
want
for
to talk to you.
you. That's right. And, whatever that thing is that could really challenge us physically.
Physically, yeah.
And then we remind ourselves if we could do that with our bodies, if our bodies are engaged in that manner, of course we could do that with our minds because our brain is inside our bodies.
The mind is the biggest, when you're starting to run, the mind is the biggest thing that you have to hurdle. And what I tell myself, because I recently had a baby, I'm like, if
Yes.
I can physically birth a baby, I can run.
Yes. And you know what? I love that you say that. So
Mhm.
you're reminding yourself this. This body is capable. This body is extraordinary. If you brought life into the world, this body is like this masterpiece, right?
Yes.
And that is the kind of thoughts that you want going through your brain when you run into these difficulties.
Yeah.
But we don't do that, do we?
Don't. And that kind of leads me to what we had kind of briefly talked about is women specifically
Yeah.
sacrificed ourselves and don't we bury ourselves into work or whatever and we just don't.
Martyrdom.
Was it?
I think of my Catholic upbringing and going to Catholic school, and we had to study the martyrs,
Oh,
right? The saints, those that gave their life Those
Yeah.
were martyrs, right? And for the good of others.
Yeah.
I said,
That's,
I don't know if my mom was that way, if there was generational, attitudes that created the giving mother, the give. As a matter of fact, I would think
you know
that
what?
empathy is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And yet it's dangerous if you don't have really healthy boundaries.
That is very important, I think, to have those boundaries. And I had a question. So I think that if you look back in history, I think we generationally or through it, we inherit things over the years, right?
Yes.
And things change, obviously, but we inherit these traits from our ancestors or from women. And that's kind of what I think naturally we just sacrifice our can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
I'm just listening so intently. I love what you're saying.
yeah. And I don't know, I feel like I'm just this got brought up because I'm listening to a book on why we dream, and it's really fascinating to me. I'm like I'm taking it all in, and I'm gonna write something about it. But I think there's something to be said about understanding or seeing how we take on some of these things just without even realizing we do.
We imitate
Yeah.
at the expense of our own authenticity. And we put these expectations on ourselves from others, and we're taught to please and to meet up to those expectations at the expense of our own authenticity, because it's scary to challenge what you think is your worth when others are sharing how you get worth to them. So as a woman, I have experienced that, like, maybe in my upbringing, I was never supposed to be a working woman. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur because before I went into automotive, I worked for myself for all those years. So I did not work for a company. So solopreneur,
I remember this from our
I think they
with
call it,
your
there's a new name for it, like where you do a solopreneur. So there's a name for everything, isn't there?
there is. And I remember this conversation because it was really hard with you and your father's relationship, I think, right? Because he had this expectation of what
Well,
he wanted for you.
yes, we were very traditional. Yes, and so I did not want to disappoint him, and I didn't want to disappoint my mother, and maybe even Jason a bit, my husband, would know that he was marrying someone who came from a traditional family, and I knew that I did not feel alive. I did not feel like I was even breathing if I wasn't researching something, exploring it, and then figuring out, like, how do I apply this? What do I do with this? And I found that some of my earlier job choices when I would work for companies really restricted me, in the sense that I was working for a lot of micromanagers. And so
Yeah,
I was always just executing someone else's research and ideas. And this part of me was not satisfied
that's
at
not
all.
satisfying. No.
And I felt ashamed of that. Like, I've got a great job. Like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not grateful for this? And it's because I was taking somebody else's expectations of me and I was living them to make sure that I maintained my worth for them at the expense of my own genuine me, of my own authentic me.
Yeah.
And no one was giving me permission to do that. And as a younger woman, I didn't know to give it to myself. And I didn't have a lot of role models. I don't know that women talk about these things as much as we can to support one another and
No.
to say, you do it your way, and I'm going to cheerlead,
Yeah.
And so I ended up really miserable in my jobs. And I left one and I said, I don't think I could do that again. And then I generalized at that age, and I said, I'm never going to put myself in that situation again. I'm going to try and do this on my own. And I did. I did until I, joined the auto group. And one of the reasons I think it works for me with Scott Auto Group is because I do believe that our dealer principal, Duke Scott, values entrepreneurial thinking. And so I kind of have the best of both worlds there.
You do. Yes.
And I think that's why I can be in that space.
And I think it's possible to be in that space without having your own company, because I can relate to that in many ways. It took a while to get here with PartsEdge and what I'm doing, but they always had that trust, or that gave me that freedom to explore and figure this out. And how do we market, how do we do all these things? So that, when you were talking about having that ability to research or to try things, is like incredibly empowering and exciting, because you're not restricted. You're like, this is what's working, I'm figuring this out.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
when you talk about it, I could hear your energy. And what is one thing that a company really needs to do with each individual talented person? Find what gives them energy, match them up with what the company needs, and you've got a home run.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when you have those, like a dealer principal, who know that, I don't know where he learns it, I don't know how he learned it, but to know that those that are on an executive team, myself, when I'm bringing people onto our team, with some of the others, when we hire new persons, I also have to say to myself, like, how do I activate their energy? Like, that's part of my responsibility. How do I activate their energy for the brand promise
For the brand. Yeah.
in their own way? I don't want to script them.
Yes.
I want it to be real. I want their thoughtfulness and their professionalism to belong to them, because that authenticity is going to be felt by our guest, and the outcome is going to be connection. And I know that, in a world that's not as connected because of all this
We're
technology
so
and
connected.
screens, once you run into that human interaction that feels so connected, suddenly it's going to be about, I need to get my car from Kim, because like she just was fantastic with me on the phone. Or I need to get my car from, Eddie, because he sent me this great video, and he didn't even talk about the car. He talked about what he's going to do so that I feel good even showing up at the appointment. So thoughtfulness and professionalism, that has to be their version of it. I mean, core values wise, it needs to match. But if it's so scripted, that's not going to work either. That's not going to close the gap between what we're messaging and the actual experience in the dealership. And so I think that's another, we go back and forth between life and work. I love it, because really that's what it is.
It really is, because we work. I don't want to say this wrong. We don't work to live. We live to work. Is it work to live? No, live to work. It's live to work. That's the right way to say it.
Live to work, right? And what you said before is why I'm building on it, is because like I saw your energy as you're talking about that entrepreneurial part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the energy that allows us to feel personal success. And so if you're able to, to use that in the workplace, then you don't have this struggle between, work and life, because work and life work together.
Work together.
And I say that, and it sounds really eloquent, right? It's hard as hell to get it right. Oh my gosh, my job is hard. Those who work on my team, their jobs are hard. Like, what we're trying to do at Scott Auto Group is really hard. What I'm trying to do in my own life is really hard. I work with my husband.
Yes.
So take my words with a great, what do they say? Take my words cautiously.
Okay.
We haven't figured it out exactly, but you have to have that as the goal.
Okay.
It's a good goal, right?
Yeah.
And so long as you're implementing it and giving it your best, That's what's going to achieve it.
Yes. Could be. I think there are very many of us that either have spouses or significant others in the same space or in the same industry.
Yes.
And I think, there's benefits to that because you can really talk about work and relate and the struggles and things. But then there's the disadvantage is, or not disadvantage, but the downfall to that is
There are
you have
disadvantages.
disadvantages, yeah, of do we even have a relationship or are we just talking about work all the time? Like,
Mhm.
and then I can imagine too with younger children for us, it's like we're just trying to keep them alive. We're trying to, have our life. And then we're trying to like, it's like, when do we, it's like
Yes.
that balancing of everything.
Yes.
Date nights are important. Grandparents are
Oh,
important.
and Jason and I flunked there for a long time. We did. We did great, and then we'd flunk. And then we
Yeah.
did great, and then we'd flunk.
I
That's
think it's okay to
interesting.
flunk though, because then you learn from it. As long as you're learning from it and you're both working on it together, you
Yes.
can keep going through those because there's going to be times where work is really demanding and you're just focused on it. And then there's going to be times where it's like, okay, I got this figured out. We're kind of smooth. And then boom, something
Yes.
happens.
Yes. And to be honest with you, if the organization is growing and really thriving, it is going to be demanding because growth and performance-based months, those are demanding.
Yes.
And so it would be scary if it felt too easy because that's mediocrity,
Yes.
right? So that's interesting. Well, I was working as an independent digital marketing consultant as Jason was still in his younger years. He's been there almost 25 years. And so when he was a sales manager, that was a heck of a schedule for a wife to kind of absorb.
Hmm.
And so what I used to do is it's always my spaghetti story. I don't know why I say spaghetti. It's not what we ate every time I came, but I'd say
Oh,
I packed up the spaghetti, I'd packed up the kids, and I would always show up and I would always make sure that we still had family meals at the dealership. And so Lance and Chase, they really grew up on the
I'm
showroom
spaghetti.
floor.
I'm just
And
kidding.
so I was very much a part of this organization before I officially became part of it. My
Hmm.
heart was in it. How my family was supported was in it. And so it was pretty neat. In fact, one time I found my 5-year-old son, maybe he was 5 at the time. It's when the Odysseys came out with they had like a built-in vacuum, the Honda
Oh,
Odysseys.
yes, yes. Yeah.
And there would be, chit chat, and all of a sudden the little one, you have little ones, they'd go run off, right?
Hmm.
And I found him selling an Odyssey
He was
in the
selling it.
showroom. He was showing this family how awesome it is that it had a vacuum in it, right? And I was mortified for a moment. I'm like, oh my God, I left my eyes off him, and here he is interrupting their entire experience.
Yeah.
And when I went over, I actually learned something from that. They loved it. He made them enjoy this stressful experience because he brought a little bit of fun, a little
Hmm.
bit of lighthearted into it. It didn't feel so heavy. And I made sure that I put that in my brain. And I
Yeah.
said, oh, this is a different experience. It's a big decision, but if you're able to put some fun into it, to kind of have those moments,
Hmm.
it's going to feel totally different for them.
It is.
So,
So
him,
side note, make
yeah,
videos with 5-year-olds selling vans.
right, right. Well, isn't it funny? We could, again, I was mortified for a moment, and then yet it was my learning moment,
It was, yeah.
you know?
Well, our kids teach us so much. It's incredible.
Don't they? You know
They
what they
truly do.
teach us? And I'm going to suggest that you never lose this.
Okay.
They wonder,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Wondering. And
Hmm.
you know what wonder leads to? Awe. AWE.
Yeah. Ah.
If you wonder, it leads to awe. And if you keep wonder in your life and you keep awe in your life, it's extraordinary. It's another source. It's another source. Let's go back real quick to something else we talked about. We said, how is it that you can handle the heaviness? How do you do working with your spouse, right?
Yeah.
So I've always made sure that, and I just recently talked about it in the term of gardens, and it
Okay.
resonated. So I'm going to bring it up again. So I always say that in our lives, right, this is a very heavy industry that we're in the sense that it requires a lot of commitment, a lot of work. So you have to, this is one garden, our work garden, right? And if that's your only garden and it goes through a really difficult season, what do you have to sustain you? You're in drought. So one of the things that I would suggest too is that you have friendships. Running is my hobby, so you have a physical activity, whether it's yoga, running, weightlifting, jujitsu, whatever it has to be.
Just
Something
something.
physical is a garden. I have a spiritual garden. I'm a Christian. And so for me, that's very important too. That is fundamental to my energy and to my self-worth. I have my neighborhood and my community. So each one of those, if each one is a garden, if there's something going wrong in one, if it doesn't produce what you need it to produce, if it doesn't go in the direction you needed it to go into, you're not devastated and disappointed because you have others to sustain you. And in your life, they're going to change too. Like my children were a garden, and the joy that I got from the wonder and the awe and those early years of their asking all those questions. And then as they grew up, now they want their independence, right? So now I have room. What do I have to do? I have to plan a new garden, right? So that you have all these areas of your life. And I was just saying the other day, maybe in a clubhouse room, how very important is it that we keep that in mind and we work on them so that we are able to do this very hard work, which is in the dealership, which is in this automotive space, So because my husband and I understand that, we work on that together. I think it's one of the ways that we've been able to stay in the same space for 12 years and work together. And those gardens, make sure they need tending, right? So you can't just talk about work all the time. Right. So one day I decided I was going to be a gardener. It just happened. Right? And so
No, I think it's perfect.
there you go, right? So you certainly can't think about all these other things when you're trying to learn how to keep these dang plants alive. And by the way, I was terrible at first, and I learned how to do it. And now I'm pretty good at it. And I introduced him into my new joy, and it became a joy of his. I don't know that it was right away, but now it is. Now he's a gardener as well. And he does that for me also. Like, he loves to bike. I really didn't know that I liked to bike. I just thought that's what you did when you were a kid and, your parents couldn't afford to buy you a car at 16. But you did it for fun. And then he started taking me on these bike rides, and I was like, oh, wow, this is super. Not only is this super, but this makes me feel like a kid again.
Like a kid, yeah. We got bikes because Trinity learned how to ride, and it was like, I feel like a kid. This is fun.
Oh my gosh, I know. So bike riding is so much fun. So that is one of the tricks that Jason and I have for shutting off the work talk. Now, date night hasn't gone well, but now let's redefine date night. So here we go. Ready? This is how I do the shifts. You want to watch it in real life? So do we do these romantic date nights? No. But what if going for a bike ride is a date?
Yeah.
What if going for a run is a date?
That's a date, yes.
What if going to the gardening store and picking up these new native plants and trying this new stuff? What if that's a date, right? So maybe we have been doing date nights, but not how others would traditionally have seen date night done.
And you have to also, that's an important thing. We cannot think about how other people are going to perceive our relationships or our lives. We have to do what works for us. If going to the
Only
gardening
get
store is a
one.
date, what? Sorry.
We only get one. You have to do it your way. And I have to also see how you do it as a woman different than me. And you as well see how I do it different than me. Oh, that's different. Start cheering, right? Like, just start cheering for each other. We're all
Yeah.
figuring it out, right? I
Yeah.
always bring the woman theme back in because I know it's a very important theme. I just watched your previous podcast. There was a
With
phenomenal guest.
Jamie.
And is it, say it again?
Was it Jamie?
Yes.
Jamie Farley, yes.
And she also has a podcast. Is that right?
Get in
And
her
it is
lane.
called,
Get in her lane.
right. So
Yes.
guess what? You have a lane, right? Like, okay, I know getting her lane it could be loaded too. That could be a loaded get in your lane, right? But in a sense, like, everyone, what is the lane, right? That's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get that you could have a whole bunch of lanes, right?
Yeah.
They're going to look different, right?
We're all gonna be different.
Yeah, but we're all going kind of forward together. So that's how I like to really support women in this space too. And our individual choices, how we handle work, how we handle the balance, how we are there for one another, how we're moving it ahead in a different direction to match market expectations, which a large part of that we know are a very strong female consumer. Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. And
Well,
so, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like we could go on forever.
Yeah.
And I think that this has been really, really incredible. And I think anyone listening is going to want to connect with you. Just like I wanted to I just want to talk to you all day and hang out with you. I wish we could
It's such a
physically hang
beautiful
out.
compliment. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm
And thank
humbled
you.
by that because I may not understand it completely, but I do accept it. So if there are things that I can share from my experiences or my daily, or, that makes it easier for others to just have permission to do it authentically their way. And I could be a cheerleader, from afar or on LinkedIn, or if there's someone who, really needs a phone call and a conversation. That's one of my goals in this space.
I think you're doing it. So I think just keep
Thank
doing what
you.
you're doing. And
And you are too.
thank you.
Yes, you
I
are
hope. I
too.
mean, this life is not hard, but we go through we going through life and figuring things out. It's hard, but finding the joy in every piece of what we
Just
go
like
through.
anything that's hard, you have to break it up into these little chunks, right? And so I would say break your life up into moments and then take those moments and stack them up. And you end up being like me and just extraordinary in my own way, not in someone else's way. But if someone says, "What do you think?" I'm like, I kind of live an extraordinary life. Would
Yeah.
others find me extraordinary? I don't care. I find
Yeah.
my life extraordinary. So that's what I would want for you. I think you're doing it.
Thank you.
And keep doing it.
I'll keep doing it.
Yes.
I'm
And so
loving it.
many of us are women and men and young professionals. And I'm excited for our industry.
I really am.
I
It's
think
incredible.
we're bringing in there's a change that's occurring little by little, and it's really a good shift.
It
It's
is.
really a shift towards a humanness and connection, and this work is very meaningful. People's cars make their lives work.
It yes, they do. I've definitely experienced that. We all experience it.
I think
It's our
that's
life.
so meaningful. So
It's
it's a
me
really good space to be in. And so since we know that, we're not really dealing with their cars, are we? We're dealing with
with our
people.
life and
That's
people.
right. And so if we're dealing with people, we have to be people with one another. We have to treat one another very well. We have to, keep that humanness in it. And I feel that we're doing that. You're doing that I'm trying, a lot of people are trying, so we'll all keep going together. That will be our force.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
really
of course.
appreciate this conversation. Thank you for asking me to be a guest. I am flattered.
I love that you joined, and I was most excited about this conversation. And it's probably one of my longer ones because we just talk so well and talk about all the important things. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me on the Trailblaze Your Path podcast. I hope you're leaving us inspired. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps. Follow me on social media, check out our YouTube channel for more content, and remember, new episodes drop every other Friday. Keep blazing your own trail, and I'll catch up with you next time.